Okay, I have the top of the hour, so I'm going to get us started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kyla Torrey. I'm the Program Director for Digital Learning at the Coordinating Board. I'm sure some of you have heard me speak about our OER grants before, but today we're specifically talking with our colleagues at Dallas College about providing technical assistance for the open OER grant program at the Coordinating Board. Before we get started with that, just a couple of housekeeping items. There is live captioning available. I think you can choose at the bottom of your screen whether or not you want that to show up. We have both the chat and the Q&A enabled. We encourage you to use the chat to collaborate, say where you're from, say hi. But if you have any questions, we would recommend that you put them in the question and answers just so that we can keep track of them better, make sure we get them all answered. We are recording this webinar, and the recording will be made available to you by email and also online after the fact. So before I hand it over to my colleagues at Dallas College, I'm just going to give a brief introduction about what is this grant all about. So we have an open educational resources grant. There are two types of grant within this program: development grants and implementation grants. And they are for developing new OER or redesigning OER within specific content areas, and I'll talk about that in a minute. This is open to public and independent institutions and does require matching from institutions. And we're focusing on, for this grant program, frequently transferred Texas core curriculum courses, co-requisite courses, and workforce courses in high-value fields. There are 3 rounds of applications for this grant program. Round 1 and round 2 are now closed, but round 3 is still open, and the deadline has been extended to January 31st. So there's plenty of time to still apply if you are interested in doing so. The application form, the RFA, all of the information that you need to apply for a grant, you can find at the highered.texas.gov/OER-gear website. And we'll put that in the chat as well so that you can take a look at that. So as I said, there are 2 types of eligible projects under this grant program. Development grants are up to $25,000 and they're for creating new OER. Institutional collaboration is required within development grants, and that can look like sort of a one-to-one. You collaborate with faculty at a different institution for peer review, something like that. Or you can create a consortium of institutions where each institution is fulfilling the terms of the RFA and is working together to do so. The other type of grant is implementation grants, and these are up to $5,000 for implementing existing OER in courses. We encourage institutional collaboration for these grants, but it's not required. For both types of projects, the OER developed should be for online delivery. It should be within one of those 3 content areas of Texas core curriculum, co-requisite, or WECM courses. We're giving priority for high transfer Texas core curriculum courses, and you can find the list of the 50 highest transfer courses in the state on the website. And also we're giving priority for WECM courses leading to high value credentials. And again, for both types of grants, we do require matching from the institution. So, but the reason we're here today is because there is technical assistance available. We've partnered with 3 institutions for this grant program to help the grantees with the execution of the grant and to help us all learn more about OER and support OER in the state. So those 3 institutions are OpenStax at Rice University, the Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin, and Dallas College, who we'll be talking to today. I'm going to let our colleagues from Dallas College introduce yourselves, but just let me know when you would like me to switch slides for you.
Thanks, Kyla. Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Morris. I am the Senior Vice Provost for Academic Services at Dallas College. And before I introduce my colleagues, I thought it would be important to share with you, many of you might be saying, who is Dallas College? Well, we are formerly Dallas County Community College District, and if you had heard or may have not have heard, back in July, we became a singly accredited institution where we took our 7 independently accredited colleges, and now we are under the single umbrella of Dallas College. So let me first say thanks to our coordinating board friends. We are just delighted to be participating in this really, I think, cutting edge effort with the state of Texas around OER and digital asset development. So today I've got a couple of my team members who are joining me. I have Carla Damron, who is the Dean for the Center of Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And that is our new umbrella functional area that really drives faculty professional development under the new Dallas College umbrella. I also have Dr. Terry DiPaolo, who is our recently appointed Vice Provost of e-learning. And a lot of this work, particularly around digital asset development, the democratization of content, really is falling in his area, and he will be leading a lot of the work around this. And then Beth Stahl, who is joining us as well. She is our director of the academic incubator. That is a new space in our new Dallas College umbrella where we are testing out new programmatic areas. So she will be part of this team today. Part of the team moving forward. I don't know if she's on the call today with us or not, but I wanted to introduce her nonetheless. So Kyla, could you go to the next slide? I want to just give some basic introductory concepts on how Dallas College can support your efforts, particularly if you are applying for one of these grants. So we want to be open to the wide range of institutions, but also where you are in your path in OER development. So we kind of understand that going in. And so even if you are new to OER experience, we want to be able to really walk alongside of you through this process and being able to connect you to resources that may exist both internally at Dallas College, but access that we may have through connections to really help you to begin your journey in the OER experience. We also want to work a lot, and we would love to devote some resources to around strategy development. So really, if you're at a stage where you know this is something you want to proceed, but you may need some just some strategy underpinning, we want to be able to provide that service to grant awardees as well. And then finally, as most of you know, so much is fundamental to OER, particularly around connecting to vital faculty and staff resources, whether that's through library resources or other faculty content expertise that, depending on your interest and area, we want to be able to connect you with. I do want to point out one final thought, and then I will turn it over to one of my colleagues, is as Kyla mentioned earlier, our focus is primarily around the career and technical areas. So we mentioned the WECM piece. That'll be the area where we will provide probably the most expertise, but nonetheless, we're looking forward to assisting universities, community colleges, and independent organizations in how to best help you proceed. So Kyla, we go to the next slide. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Carla Damron.
Great, thanks, Greg. So let's look at OER in a nutshell. It's really, there's 2 different ways that you can do OER. First, you can curate resources for, you can use curated resources that are created by others, or you can create new resources which you then make available to others. Now, each OER project is different, and rarely is there an OER adoption that is turnkey ready without some kind of modifications to those resources. So we have to think about how we're going to design those courses or programs and the intended student population as we curate and, if needed, create the OER resources. Now, whether you're curating or creating, we're going to follow processes that are listed kind of on the side over there. So we're going to research the topics to plan for the learning modules. And then we're going to organize the content and evaluate those resources as we develop them into new learning resources for our students and also our community. Kyla, next slide. So why OER? So at Dallas College, we started out thinking about OER as a cost savings tool for our students, but we found that it was much more than that. One of our major OER projects was to curate resources for high enrollment core courses that we used in an online associate's degree that was made up of mainly 8-week courses. And we used a development team to be able to do that. And that was part of 3 different parts to it. First was a faculty member that was our subject matter expert. Second was librarians that would help identify possible resources that could be curate that content. And then third was our instructional designer that would help plan in the organization of the course. So not only did we find that this was a cost savings for our students, but we found that there was a huge benefit of all of our students being able to have their course materials available on day 1. And along with that with those course materials that were embedded into our courses, that we found that onboarding our new faculty in those areas was much easier. And then as we needed to make major changes to that and respond to the emerging needs, it made it much more easier as well. So now that we've talked about the why, let's hand it over to Terry to talk more in detail about our journey in WECM OER and also where we're headed in the future.
Thank you, Carla. Carla, I wonder if we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Carla. So our own journey with OER has been one that's followed by many institutions, but there is no one journey in your use of OER. In our case, we probably started with OER some 5, maybe 8 years ago, where individual faculty were incorporating OER into a few of their courses, and they were really focused on curating OER from across sources, mostly US institutions. This initial individual experimentation evolved into groups of faculty coming together. And here they were asking, can we do this as a team? The idea being a group coming together to curate, once again, a range of resources in a common discipline that they could use across courses they were all teaching. And the idea evolved into the creation of course templates that would incorporate OER. So this was kind of sustained for a number of years and was really the initial foray into the use of OER across Dallas College. In more recent years, however, we've taken a more increasingly sophisticated approach to curation. Increasingly, we try and curate many resources into a course. And we're looking at those resources not just coming from US institutions, but increasingly we're looking at globally sourced resources as the world has really seized the idea and power of OER. And one of the other things that's happening is that we're not just adopting OER resources as they exist. 2 key terms in the OER world are mashups and remixing. This idea of mashing up or connecting 2 different or more than 2 different OERs together, and the idea of remixing, where you maybe take a single open educational resource and kind of think about, is it structured in the way that works for your learning experience? In the future work we're planning, we're looking beyond open educational resources and looking more to a future where we democratize information and kind of develop open community resources. Open educational resources intend to be developed primarily for classes, but the fact that they're in LMS or learning management systems owned by the institution means often only students can access them. We're exploring futures where we make open educational resources or open resources available to community members who may not actually be enrolled students of ours. As I said initially, there's no right journey to a work with OER. It varies depending on institutions, the resources within those institutions, and the evolving strategic focus of institutions. We know online has become a major strategic focus of institutions during the pandemic and is likely to continue to be. So strategies evolving around online for many institutions as well. But the other key thing about the journey with OER for many institutions, regardless of their state and their nation, is that it takes a village. Good, successful OER depends on collaboration across an institution, with faculty working collaboratively with support services like IT, library, tutoring, to develop learning experiences built on OER. Kyla, I wonder if you can forward to the next slide, please. An example from our own development is the Supervisor Certificate. This was a level 1 certificate that was developed initially as a stackable credential. The idea that we have a level 1 certificate that would lead to a degree eventually. And so one of the things that came about from the work on this project were a series of lessons that we can already share with other institutions. And these are kind of steps in a process, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those as the presentation continues. But it's worthwhile flagging to think carefully about your goal. How realistic is an entire course or program constituted of OER? In developing this particular certificate, much work went into developing a sense of where would we source the OER and the quality of the OER as well. The quality of OER is an important factor to consider. There's much OER available across the globe, but it's important to think about the quality of OER when you're thinking about developing learning experiences. And so one of the lessons we learned very quickly was the time that's needed upfront to think about your OER development. And so I would recommend anyone thinking about applying for these grants, thinking about an initial assignment, setting aside roughly 10 hours. I know that sounds a lot of time, but the reality is that work with OER is time consuming. And so it's really a research project that's focused on, has this been done before? Has it been done in the US? Has it been done globally? Next, who can you connect with for advice and support? Consider authors of OER, or consider organizations that might be able to kind of lend themselves or share information that would be associated with the OER work you want to kind of embark on. Critically, what is available and is it going to meet my needs are where you're trying to get to with this work. A huge amount of OER exists. Nearly every day there's something new being produced. And so it's really important to kind of step back from content and focus more on what you're trying to accomplish and whether or not what's available meets your needs. And thinking about your design approach, or backward design for the instructional designers on the call, is really an important consideration about this as well. There's an awful lot of content available out there, but it's important to begin your consideration with what are the outcomes you want to accomplish? How are you going to go about the assessment of learning in the course you're wanting to develop? And how are you going to establish engagement between yourself, your students, and the content within the course? And of course, then where do you find the content that services those needs? And finally, reiterating that point again, it takes a village. Undertaking research is something you can undertake alone, but the reality is it's helped by being supported by your colleagues across your institution, and involving colleagues across your institution early on in this research process as well. A huge resource are librarians who increasingly are taking their research skills and lending those research skills and aptitudes to the sourcing, curation of OER materials. Carla, next slide, please. So lessons we've learned from our own work on OER, both in the CTE field, but also in Gen Ed. One of the key lessons to highlight in this presentation is that there's actually limited workforce content, contrasted with the wealth of Gen Ed OER. There are many resources, repositories that we can provide access to, sourced globally, where you can search for different OER content, but the reality is much of those repositories contain very little workforce related OER. So development is a good place to be if you're thinking about the grants. In terms of assessment, it's interesting, you've heard me talk a lot about content, less so about assessment. Assessment is often absent or limited in terms of shelf life when it comes to OER. Let me just unpack those. Oftentimes there are resources, there are textbooks, there are readings that you can use, but what if you're wanting to assess students? Typically instructors have been used to using quiz pools or tests or assignments they've created themselves. The creation of assignments is really important because that's often where we found in our development a lot of time goes into checking pools of questions that may be available out there. And even when those pools are available, often they have a limited shelf life. If you think about using something that already exists as OER, the likelihood someone else is using it as well. So what are the implications for a pool of questions or a set of assignment prompts being shared publicly in both the US and the global space in a period where we're all attuned to academic dishonesty on the internet? And finally, updating, especially for workforce content, needs to be a consideration from the start. This is really a consideration about sustainability. Work on OER is not just about developing a course and then running with it for X amount of time. Development with OER is really about thinking, embarking on an ongoing process of keeping content up to date and aligned with workforce needs, especially in the CTE area. Kyla, I wonder if we can go to the next slide, please. So in our ongoing work around CTE, we're responding to labour market needs in the Dallas Metroplex, concentrating our efforts on healthcare, business and finance, and IT. These are interesting fields because, as we're discovering, there's limited OER in these areas, and we're exploring how we partner with other organisations and institutions to create and maybe even curate OER that we don't know about. Also, the democratization of knowledge. That piece I mentioned earlier, we talk often about open educational resources as resources for educational institutions, and incidentally what we do is we place them in courses that reside in spaces that only our students can access them. One of the things we're wanting to do is really service the needs of our community and think about ways in which we make content materials available to the community, so maybe they can make an assessment about whether or not they want to come and study a particular course or program with us, or more so making available to them information that's useful for them within the community as well. For example, one of the things we're talking about and looking at the moment are mental health resources. What's needed in the pandemic and post the pandemic, and how can we kind of begin the work of servicing that need within our own ecology? And finally, we've begun to talk about creating an OER playbook. An OER playbook or some sort of guide for an institution is useful. The likelihood is there are a number of people in your own institutions doing work on OER, but coalescing the strategies and approaches people take to the development of OER in an institution is important if you really want to be strategic about the use of OER in your institution. So we're looking to develop our own playbook as an institution that we would make available to all our own faculty and staff. But the idea is really to kind of bring people together to begin that conversation about how do we use OER, what purpose do they serve, and how do they serve in our critical mission of student success. Next slide, please. So one of the things I would highlight to anyone thinking about an application to grant, or an applicant indeed already, is looking at the OER text repository and the resources therein. I've just outlined here 4 steps you can take that quickly take you to really, really useful information there. I want to highlight in particular the work undertaken by our colleagues at Digitex. I know Judith Sebester is on this call. Judith and her team have undertaken an enormous lift drawing together some absolutely phenomenal materials that guide individuals new to the OER space through the basics of OER. These are critical modules, and there are a number of them. These are critical modules for applicants to kind of review if they're new to OER, if they're thinking about curation or even creation. Next slide, please, Kyla. So a reminder of the points that Greg mentioned earlier. We're here to help you in a number of different ways. With your initial planning, if you're new to OER, if you've not undertaken curation or even creation of OER resources, we're here to help. Your strategy. Really important to think about how your work on OER is going to impact your institution and how it will connect with the strategy of your institution. And so we can help you kind of think about some of the pieces around what you want to accomplish, how to make it a reality, and most importantly, how to make it sustainable. And finally, connecting you. As Greg mentioned, we're here to help you connect with the right parties at your institution, maybe our institution, and other institutions, both in the state, nationally, and internationally as well. And I want to highlight our email address there. Anyone can reach out to us via that email address, and you'll get a response from one of us on the call today about your support needs moving forward. Kyla, that's it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing now and see if there are any questions directly for Dallas College before I go back to talking about the grant more generally. So I don't know if there are any questions. Feel free to put them in the question and answer, direct questions for Dallas College, and we can answer those now. I want to thank you all for coming, for sure. Dallas College for showing us the work that you've been doing. That was very interesting. So we have a question about how examples for how you evaluated the OER that you can share.
Can I take that? And I'm not sure if participants have access to microphone use as well. Judith, I know your area has developed some materials or have curated materials about the assessment of the quality of OER. Judith, are you able to say anything about the work that your team has done on that?
She is not able to talk, but
okay.
Judith, if you want to put something in the chat for us, we would be happy.
So Elisa, just to say, Digitex have some resources, both in their training modules and on the Digitex website around OER. And one of the things that I believe they've produced, and I had a look at and it informed much of our conversation as well, was a rubric for the assessment of quality in OER.
Great. I'm sure we have a question, the question and answer. Do we need to articulate how we'll partner or collaborate with Dallas College in the grant application? Yes, so I'll get to that a little bit more in a minute, but you would specify which technical assistance partner you would want to partner with if it was Dallas College, and what sorts of technical assistance you're looking for in your application. And then we would match the awardees with technical assistance partners at the point of award. So in other words, you can put it in your application. You don't necessarily need to reach out to them, but they do give you their OER email if you have questions about that. So. Okay. Well, I'm sure other questions will come up. Let me just talk a little bit more about the grant, and then we'll see where we go from there. So we have 3 technical assistance partners. Dallas College is obviously one of them, OpenStax, and the Dana Center at UT Austin. And these are formidable partners in the world of OER, and we're very excited to be working with them. there is also support on your campus too. So by all means, reach out and ask in your application to work with a technical assistance partner, but don't discount the support that you can get on your own campus from the library, from an OER office, from the digital learning office, from your instructional designers. So I just wanted to mention that support is available. Don't feel like you have to do this by yourself. There's support on your campus. There's support from us with our technical assistance partners. So there's lots of assistance available. So I said we have an inquiry email here for the coordinating board, oer@highered.texas.gov. And I think Kate or someone will put that in the chat so that you can get that directly. I said, again, specify in your application which of our technical assistance partners you might want to work with and what sort of assistance you'd like for the execution of grant outcomes. So you are all present in this webinar and you will receive a copy of the video if you care to look back and see what sort of assistance is being offered. We had a webinar with OpenStax this morning. That video will be available online if you're interested in that. And we have a webinar with the data center tomorrow at 2 p.m. So I encourage you to attend all the webinars, see what the available assistance is, and then make a decision about whether or not you would like to ask for technical assistance within your application. Just some useful websites. The OER text repository, as Terry said, is a wonderful place to start your search for OER. It's specific to Texas higher education. There are lots of great resources in there, from everything from how to use OER to the resources that you need for your history course, your English course, there's welding resources. There's all sorts of things in there, and we're ever expanding, which is exciting. And all of the resources that are developed through this grant program will be available through OER Text in the future too. If you want to learn more about the grant program, if you're interested in applying, go to the highered.texas.gov/OER Gear site, and you'll find the information that you need there. Look through the RFA. There are a number of questions in the RFA that should be answered in your application. If you have any questions, if anything's unclear, feel free to email us at oer@highered.texas.gov about the grant program. And I've put my email there too. You're welcome to contact me directly if you have any OER related questions. So, do we have questions either about the grant program or any of the technical assistance that Dallas College is providing? Dallas College's wonderful work in OER. Feel free to ask those now.
Kyla, I wonder if I can jump in with a comment as well. You would have seen the term digital fluency in one of the earlier slides. One of the things I'll say is often work with OER is a two-pronged process. There's work around the actual development of content or curation of content, but a lot of that work and the incorporation into a class relies on digital fluency. Work with OER is essentially work with digital tools. And so it's really important that you think about your own comfort with technology, what you're comfortable kind of using, what kind of support you may need as a potential author or creator or curator of OER kind of moving forward as well. So I'd urge kind of grant applicants to also be thinking about their own comfort level with technology and their own kind of ongoing needs with technology should they be successful grant applicants.
Thank you, Terry. That's a great point, especially since the OER is not necessarily always digital, but usually it is digital. Yep. And for this grant program, we require that the resources be available for online use. So yes, your comfort with or your digital fluency will come into play. And so if you need support with that, there are a number of areas where you can find that.
And while people get their questions or get their thoughts sorted out, we definitely want to reiterate that a lot of what we are presenting today is information that may be familiar to several of you, or it may be completely new. And the idea is that if you have an interest in this area, we want you to know you have support. It may not be local to your campus. It may be in one of our technology assistance partners. It may be through the coordinating board. But if you are interested, please make sure to apply for the grant. Try to reach out because we will have people along the way that will guide you. As you heard from our amazing colleagues at Dallas College, there are resources available to you. There's expertise available to you to guide you through every step of this journey. So if you or a set of colleagues across institutions, across systems, four-year university, two-year colleges, consortiums, let's be creative. If you have an idea, talk to us about it. Let's hash it out a little bit and let's figure out what is the best avenue to make sure that we can bring that idea into fruition. Because ultimately, we want to make sure that this is strengthening Texas higher education. And as Terry mentioned, it takes a village. It takes all of us to make it happen.
Thank you, Michelle. And for those of you who don't know, and I should have introduced her before, Michelle Singh is our new Assistant Commissioner for Digital Learning at the Coordinating Board. And we're thrilled to have her with us in our new Division of Digital Learning at the Coordinating Board. So there are big things happening in digital learning and OER at the Coordinating Board and in Texas, and we're excited. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Oh, I guess I do. Never mind, I spoke too soon. If your course is a Gen Ed or ACGM course, are you still able to select to work with Dallas College? I'm gonna let my Dallas College colleagues answer that question.
Oh, I think that's a resounding yes. And actually, all of us on this call have experience of working with OER for our own courses. Many of us teaching the Gen Ed space, so we have our own experience, and we'd love to work with folk around the ACGM courses as well.
That's great. Yeah. We're really excited to expand the offerings in OER text to more ACGM courses and more workforce courses. As Terry said, there's a lot of need in that area. So we're looking forward to your grant applications and to seeing what sort of projects you come up with so we can share all that good work with the rest of the state.
And I think also, Carla, it's worth mentioning, this is where organizations like Digitex as well come into play, especially around ACGM courses. ACGM, Digitex has a huge membership, many of whom have experience of OER development themselves. And so that's one of the kind of places where we all need to be thinking about going to connect and engage with others across the state.
Yeah, agreed. And I think one of the most exciting parts about our technical assistance program is not only the assistance that's going to be given grantees, which is wonderful, but also the fact that we all get to collaborate and come up with new and exciting ways to expand OER work in the state. So I'm really looking forward to this partnership and all our technical assistance partnerships. Making sure I didn't miss any questions in the chat, but I don't think so. Okay. Well, unless there are more comments, I don't know if our Dallas College colleagues have anything else to say on the technical assistance they'll be providing before we close out, but we can give you all a few minutes back in your day. I know everyone probably needs it. Things are very busy right now, especially at the institutions where you're starting up again, right? All right, well, I want to thank Terry, Carla, and Greg. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us what you'll be sharing with grantees, and we're looking forward to those partnerships moving forward. If you have any questions, again, email the oer@highered.texas.gov email, or email me, or email the Dallas College OER/Wacom, is that right?
All the way around.
Wacom/OER, excuse me, but it will be in the PowerPoint and on the video that you will get. So you will be receiving an email with next steps and the video, and it will also be available online. And thank you, Michelle. Yes, the application deadline is January 31st. So there's time. There's time to get your application in, and we look forward to seeing them. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.